You know, we talk a lot about the problem of quitting things too early. But what if your problem is the complete opposite, that you have way too many things you want to stick with? Well, today we're going to dive into a career strategy for all of you who were never, ever meant to be just one thing. Does this sound familiar? You look at your future and you don't see one single clear path. No, you see a dozen exciting ones, and they all feel like a genuine part of who you are. The thing is, you're not afraid of hard work. You're just totally paralyzed by the choice. This quote it hits the nail on the head, right? It perfectly captures that classic scanner's dilemma. It's that feeling of having all this potential, but you're so overwhelmed by all the possibilities that you just end up standing still. And man, that is a frustrating place to be. And, society often has a label for this, dilettante. It's usually thrown around as a negative, right? The jack of all trades, master of none. And that creates this real anxiety, this fear that your greatest strength, your boundless curiosity, is actually your biggest career liability. But what if that's totally and completely wrong? To really get past that anxiety, we first have to understand something really important. The career map most of us were handed it's just outdated. It was drawn for a world that doesn't really exist anymore. And that's exactly why following it can feel like you're walking straight into a trap. So the heart of the problem really boils down to the difference between these two environments. The old world was what you'd call a kind environment. Think of the game of golf. It's predictable, has clear rules, and repetition leads to mastery. But today's world, it's wicked. It's a lot more like being a firefighter. Every single situation is new, the rules are constantly changing, and what worked yesterday might be useless today. So that kind of environment, it created the ideal of the I-shaped person, the specialist. This is the expert who goes a mile deep in one single narrow field. And for a very long time, this was the undisputed golden path to success. Now for us scanners, the risk is becoming the exact opposite, the dash-shaped person. This is that classic jack of all trades, master of none trap. You end up knowing a little bit about everything, but you don't have a solid foundation in, anything. And that lack of depth is what creates that anxious feeling, like you've got no real ground to stand on. So if being a hyper-specialist feels completely wrong, but being a dabbling generalist feels totally unstable, what's the answer? Well, it turns out we need to stop thinking about job titles and start thinking about shapes. And this brings us to a fantastic new model, the M-shaped professional. You could also call it the modern polymath. This isn't about knowing a little bit about everything. No, this is about building multiple pillars of deep expertise. Just imagine this for a second. Let's say one of your pillars is data science. You go deep, you really learn it. But your second pillar is storytelling. You also go deep there. Now the connecting bar across the top of that M is all your other broad interests, psychology, history, design. Suddenly, you're not just a data scientist. You're the incredibly rare person who can take complex data and weave it into a compelling story that a CEO can actually understand and act on. That combination, it's insanely valuable. Okay, so how does this actually work? What's the secret sauce that makes the M-shape so powerful? Well, it comes down to a cognitive tool that polymaths use a lot of the time without even realizing they're doing it. It's called far transfer. So a specialist uses what's called near transfer, applying a skill to a really similar problem. But a polymath, they use far transfer. This is the amazing ability to see a pattern or a structure in one domain and apply it to solve a problem in a completely unrelated one. It's like seeing the music behind the notes. And this is where it gets really cool and concrete. Someone who understands the branching structure of tree roots might suddenly see a better way to organize a company's database. A musician who truly gets harmony might look at a messy block of software code and see a much more elegant, beautiful structure. All those seemingly random interests you've collected over the years, they're not random at all. They're your personal library of metaphors for innovation. Okay, I know what you're thinking. This all sounds great in theory, but how do you actually build an M-shaped life? Well, it takes a deliberate three-step strategy that honestly goes against a lot of the standard career advice you've probably heard. So these are the three pillars of the strategy itself. First, we're going to pursue mastery, but serially, one at a time. Then, we're going to completely reframe the purpose of our day job. And finally, we're going to build a system to handle our endless, amazing curiosity. Okay, first up, serial mastery. Here's the key. You can't build all your M pillars at once. That just leads you right back to that shallow dash shape. The trick is to pick one thing and commit to it for a season, maybe 6 to 18 months. Go deep until you feel like you've mastered the core 80%. This isn't about becoming the world's #1 expert, it's about reaching fluency. Then, and only then, you can make a conscious choice to start building your next pillar. Step 2, and this might sound a little strange, is to reframe your day job. For a mind that loves to explore, a high-passion, all-consuming, high-stress job can actually be a trap. A good enough job that gives you stability without sucking up all your mental energy isn't a compromise. It's a strategic asset. It's what gives you the surplus energy you need to build your other pillars on the side. And if you need proof, look no further than this guy. Albert Einstein did his most revolutionary, world-changing thinking, not as some esteemed university professor, but as a patent clerk. The stability and the routine of that job gave his incredible mind the freedom it needed to just wander the cosmos. And finally, step 3, build an external system. A scanner's brain is a nonstop idea factory, but your working memory is like a tiny workbench. Trying to hold every single idea in your head just leads to overwhelm. So you need to use a tool. It could be something like Notion or Obsidian, or even just old-school index cards like the sociologist Nicholas Luhmann did, to capture all your fleeting obsessions. This frees up your mind and, over time, lets you see the connections between everything.
So let's just pull this all together for a second. If you've ever felt like your intense curiosity is some kind of flaw, it is time to completely reframe that thought. Your brain is not a liability. It was never designed for the narrow little path of a specialist. It's designed to be a bridge, connecting different worlds of knowledge in totally unique and powerful ways.
Look, this journey won't always be easy, but just having a map, just understanding the M shape and the strategy to build it, can bring this incredible sense of calm. The self-blame, that voice in your head telling you to just pick one thing, it starts to fade, and it gets replaced by this quiet confidence in your own unique path. So the big takeaway is this: let go of the pressure to fit yourself into some I-shaped box. Embrace the idea that you were never meant to master just one thing. You were meant to be the person who can see how it all connects. So now that you have this new map, this new way of looking at your incredible potential, there's really only one question left to ask yourself. What worlds will you connect?